First up, as we advance through phase 2, you're now allowed to have 12 players on the ice skating, but training camp still a couple weeks away, and more players in multiple sports have been tested positive for COVID-19. So with all of those ups and downs, are you just approaching this situation with a cautious optimism? Take us through your day-to-day with all of this news every day.
Yeah, that's the way you have to go about it. Until you're told differently, you're preparing for training camp to start on July 10th. Our guys are starting to filter back into New York right now, and everybody's going to go through the proper channels in order to get cleared to start practicing with the team and things like that. So, obviously there have been guys tested. I think the players in the league in particular are going to see how, this thing evolves and how players react to the disease. But at the end of the day, our job is to continue to prepare for training camp like we're going to play. And I'm fully confident that will happen.
Some good news along those lines, if everything is good to go and you guys are able to play. Rangers president John Davidson said Kaapo Kakko, who suffers from type 1 diabetes, has been cleared to play. So great news for him as he looks to continue his development on this team.
Yeah, it's good news for him and for us. It's obviously you never want to put a player in harm's way, and their health is first and foremost. And obviously, Kaapo has certainly continued to grow as the season went on, and he's, I think he feels recharged too. Talking to him during this pandemic, I sense a little bit more pep in his step, even though he's over in Finland. He's a little bit more engaging. I think he's getting more comfortable, and that's. I think this might actually, in his mind, be the start of his second season, even though it's still the continuation of his first season. And, I think he's relieved that he feels very good about coming back and playing. I think he feels safe, and that's probably the biggest thing as we approach this training camp. But, I'm excited to have him come back.
Quinny, I'm going to let you inside the mind of a backup goalie. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
So Quinny, during practice, us goalies, we're always concerned with what the coach thinks of us. And what sometimes happens, I had to go through this in New York. I knew where everybody on the team was shooting. I knew that Ryan Callahan and Dubinsky were low blocker and Shanny was high glove. And it's not a good thing because then I get a start every couple of weeks and I'm tracking pucks for the first time. I always had a rule where I didn't want to allow 2 goals in a row because I'm worried that Torts sees and then he's not going to play me, right? I'm wondering maybe what you're thinking when you see goalies letting goals. I mean, it's news that Shesterkin's back in town and the other 2 guys will be here shortly, but how do you evaluate your goalies? Just by looking at them, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think you pay attention. Obviously, when you're the head coach, there's a lot going on in practice. You can't see everything. You're trying to see everything, but you can't. It's just impossible. But you're certainly trying to pay attention to as much as you can, and obviously goaltending is a big piece of it. And a lot of it is dependent upon what drill is happening. Obviously, you want to keep your goalie sharp, but there's also, you want the shots to be realistic. There's got to be a pace to it. There's got to be an urgency to the shooter, things of that nature. So I think there's a lot that goes into the evaluation of a goalie. We've touched on the cross-ice games. I love those for goalies. I think things happen fast. I think it's more realistic to what they're going to see in games. So, I think there's a lot that goes into it, but you're certainly keeping an eye on the goalies for sure.
All right, Coach, switching gears a little bit here. When looking back at on the season, as we talked about on the show before, you guys had a lot of success against the Hurricanes this year. You swept them during the regular season. But against a team like the Philadelphia Flyers, for example, your team really seemed to struggle at certain points in the season against them. In situations like this, my question is, are you of the belief that it's not necessarily who you play, but when you play a team?
There's a lot that goes into it, Michelle, for sure. And, everybody talks about the fact that we're 4-0 against Carolina. And if you watch those games, we could have been 0-4. And if you watch the games against the Flyers, there's a lot that goes into that too. Those games were, I don't want to completely get into it, but those games were unique in their own way. And so, again, I mean, a lot of that doesn't matter right now. Not only the fact that when you get into the playoffs, you can throw all the regular season stuff out the window, but on top of that, what we are going through, I think adds a certain different twist to everything. So I don't think there's much relevance to what happened in the first, 5 months of the season to what we're going to see moving forward here.
Quinny, I have a former pro hockey player in my neighborhood named Paul Kelly, and he told me a story about when he played for Tommy McVie. Tommy sits him down and says, "You've got a lot of potential, but you know what that means, Paul? You haven't done it yet." And that's his first meeting with the coach as he turns pro. And I'm wondering if, knowing the team this year, a lot of potential before the season began, was there one point in the season period or after a game where you maybe lean back and like, man, we're pretty good? Can one game stand out for you?
You know, there were plenty of times early on, even though we were winning and losing, that I thought we were good, but we were having trouble with consistency. You know, maybe the game that jumps out at me when you talk about early on is the 4-1 win against Tampa Bay at home after we got shellacked by the Bruins 2 nights before that. And I loved how we reacted, you know, to losing to the Bruins, and now you're facing Tampa Bay, you know, a perennial Stanley Cup favorite. And it said an awful lot about our group. I think, you know, and I mentioned this before, as you're evaluating your team, you're trying to find out what type of characteristics they do have. Do they have some resiliency? Are they mentally tough? Can they rebound from a bad night? And, you know, not only did we rebound, we played very well and we defended well. I think we only gave up 12 scoring chances that night. So I knew, you know, from that, I knew that we had it in us. The goal was to be able to do it consistently. And, you know, and then I think about the game in Vancouver after we lost to Calgary out west 4-3. We lost 2 nights later to Vancouver 2-1, but boy, we played really well. And sometimes winning and losing can fool you. You know, you can win a game and if you dig deep, you could say to yourself, uh-oh, we can't do that anymore. And you could lose a game and think, we found something. And I think that Vancouver game, we all thought to ourselves, okay, this is what we need to do more consistently. And I thought from that point on, I think after that point on, I actually watching our game against Montreal, and we came back and beat them 5-2, second time we were in Montreal. I think up to that point, we had the most wins in the NHL from January 7th to I think February 22nd. We were the number 1 scoring team in the league. We were the 5th best defensive team in the league. We had the best power play. So we found that 6-7 week stretch where, you know, we had that consistency.
Speaking of that 6-7 week stretch, let's look back on a defining moment that obviously stands out to us. February 19th, Rangers had just come off to a loss to the Bruins, kind of similarly to when they came off to that loss earlier in the season. And then you're in Chicago. You're trying to get back in the playoff race. It's tied 1-1 after 2 periods. I don't know what you said in that second intermission or what those players ate or what it was, but the Rangers came out. They scored 5 goals in the 3rd period, and that sparked a 5-game winning streak. So what clicked in that second intermission that just let you guys roll like that for a few games following as well?
Well, you know, first of all, we always had that ability, right? If you look back at, you know, we had the ability to score goals. But what jumps out at me in that game is that after the second period, you know, 2 of our lines were going. The 2 lines that were god-awful those first 2 periods was Zibanejad and Strome's line. And I never do this, but for some reason I did. I just went in and challenged both those lines. I said, if I can get you 2 lines to play like the other 2 lines, we're going to win this game. Where the bleep have you been for 40 minutes? And, you know, I think it kind of pissed them off. And, you know, but again, I don't know if that's the reason it happened, but, you know, my point is we always had that in us to be able to erupt for goals. And I've said this before, we have the ability to do things teams can't do. We can score goals. It's hard to do in this league. We got to continue to be good at the things everybody can do. But the thing that jumped out at me is that as a staff, I remember sitting in the coach's room like, you know, these 2 lines have been god-awful. And, you know, we talked like time to challenge him, and I had never done that before. So it felt pretty good.